it's been a while since I did a video. More on that in a different video, actually. I'm going to be doing some sort of a channel update or whatever in the next week or so that will sort of put everything into perspective, and you'll know what's going on. Anyway, a long while ago, I pre-ordered something, and it arrived today, and it is this. The Tabletop Wargames Design Manual, or something. Designers and Writers Handbook by Rick Priestley and John Lambshead. Right? At the moment, this is just a bit of an unbooking and just a quick run through about what is in the book. It's not a review because I've only skim read bits and pieces that have jumped out at me. I've just gone through the book and looked at it and see how it's presented. But to start off with, as you can see, I don't know whether you can see that on the camera, but the sections, when you look at it properly, they've got like coloured tabs, so you can quickly skim through and find the right bit because it's all colour coded. So you've got like an index there, and each colour relates to a particular chapter in the book, so you can quickly find that, which is a nice touch. Do you know what I mean? It's quite a broad topic book, but from what I've read, it's very interesting. We start off with an introduction about wargaming and what it's about and what it's not, and the definitions of what they mean by wargaming in relationship to this particular book. They're talking about 3D flat tabletop miniature wargaming, not necessarily the counter and hex or other forms of wargaming that there are. And they're not just talking about land-based, it goes on about aircraft and marine stuff, or mixture of all really, but there you go. Chapter 2 is a very interesting discussion on scale, the various types of scale, and how that scale works in relationship to ground scale. And then we have a discussion on ranges and movement and all sorts of stuff. And the good thing is with this is because obviously Rick's written a lot of rules that we're all very familiar with, and he talks quite a lot in relationship to the games that he's written, in particular Bolt Action, Hail Caesar and stuff, and he uses examples of how the various components that he's actually discussing relate to those particular rule books, or he pulls out examples of where. So, and it's not just those. It deals with quite a lot of different sort of rules, rule books and systems and stuff, and draws examples on how that particular theory or that particular notion is played out in that particular rule set. So it gives you some solid examples. So rather than it just being one of those sort of heady discussion type topics, he brings it right into a real world example, which is really, really good. The third section, it talks about the language of design. Now this is a discussion on concepts and the way in which people, designers, talk about various things. Now, I didn't fully understand it because, like I said, I hadn't read it word for word, but we're looking at things like formalising the space, basically what's the gameplay area, and it's sort of the terminology that game designers use. So that's quite an interesting discussion. The next bit is alla icta est. I don't know Latin, but it's about random generation and dealing with the randomness of stuff, and and it goes into a discussion on probability curves and dice and different sorts of creating randomness and controlling randomness, and how you can use various methods to simulate the real world, as it were. That's my surface reading of it. So that looks quite an in-depth thing. It's very heady for me. Then we talk about how you present the rules. So, if, for example, you've got your rules, how do you convey those rules to everybody else? Because I think we've all suffered, haven't we, when we've read rules and they've not been exactly clear, or they're not what's the word, presented well, so you get sort of lost. Some of these big, thick, old tome rule books are very, very, very difficult to understand because there's just so much information, and the information is not laid out in a way that is useful to you. And there's a whole chapter dedicated to how to lay out your rules, which is quite good. Then we talk about various types of rules. Rule sets. So we have skirmish games. So it goes into a discussion about skirmish games, which is something that is particularly interesting to me from the point of view of my campaign, because a lot of the actions that I use are skirmish based. So it's quite this is going to be quite a good read for me. I'm quite looking forward to that bit. Then we talk about language and how we use, what words are used to describe things, and it goes into, it looks to me as though it goes into a discussion on the way in which you will present your rules using the written word and diagrams and all this sort of stuff. Basically, he's got three premises. It starts off with clarity, brevity, and respect. Obviously, more reading will give me more information about those. And he just goes through and describes how to present and write the rules so that they can be understood, which I think is a good point and something that certain rules publishers could do with reading. And then we talk about expansions, and you've got your core rules, and then you come across a scenario or an aspect of the game that isn't covered in the core rules, so you need to write an expansion for it, and how you deal with all of that. And that's sort of the gist of that chapter from what I have briefly read through. And then we end up with campaigns and looking at how you manage a campaign system and the rules as such, which is something else that's quite, for me, quite an interesting topic, and something that I will use. The interesting thing about this is he uses the Britannica expansion for Hail Caesar as an illustrative guide, which I think is really cool because I know that expansion, so I can look at what principles is used in relationship to that particular expansion. Have I missed anything out of the quick run through? Presenting the game rules over. No, I think that's about it really. So that's what the book contains. And like I said, I got it this morning. I spent a few hours just flicking through it and having a look. It's a very nice looking book. I think my biggest criticism of it at the moment is the fact that they've done it in this small size. I think it'd have been better as an A4 size, because then for old eyes like mine, you wouldn't have to have such tiny, tiny print. And I could read it without having to put my glasses on, but unfortunately I can't. Illustrated really well. There's good tables in it for reference. It's got a nice bibliography at the end, and it is well quoted. Well, when I say quote, each aspect or reference is made, and it's all in the back, which is a good thing. It's done very in an academic way, and obviously we have an index at the back. Now, when I first saw this book on pre-order, I think it was, I don't know whether it was Christmas last year, maybe a bit after Christmas. And I thought, oh, I'll get that. Simply because I spend a lot of time, as you know, with my campaign world, Europe, and obviously anything about writing rules or looking at or developing rules, I find interesting, and I will just buy it and just have a look. And I saw it was by Rick Priestley, and I thought, well, he's not a bad chap. He knows what he's talking about. He's done some very successful games. So it'll be interesting to see how his mind works. and what principles and guiding lights he uses when he sits down and develops things like Bolt Action or Warhammer 40k or what have you, or Antares. Do you know what I mean? So it was an interesting read. What I don't think this is I don't think this will make you write and publish a rule system in itself. Do you know what I mean? It's not a textbook, as it were, but it's interesting to see how these top end designers work. I mean, I've got all of the Cobalt guides to everything as well, so it sits very nicely with all the Cobalt stuff. If you're not familiar with them, I've got a couple of videos elsewhere in my back catalogue about the Cobalt guide to this and guide to that, so they're worth getting hold of. But I think if you're looking for a recipe book to write a game, it's probably not going to be your answer, because it doesn't seem as though it gives you an ABC to it. It describes very much the process by which and the actions by which successful game developers have written games and the processes and stuff that they use. It looks as though it's going to be quite an interesting book. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through it. I'm going to apply it in relationship to the stuff that I'm doing, and get back to you on a full review, probably in about 3 or 4 months. I think that's how, you can't review a book on the day one that you've got it, but you can do a quick unbooking and a quick flip through, which is what I hope I'm doing. I think if it's anybody that is like me, who adapts rules and sort of is trying to come up with a set of rules, a bit more than house rules, but a bit less than the, like a fully published one, it's going to be a good buy. Because, the discussion, I have read the discussion on scale and ground scale and movement and stuff, because that's fascinating. It's brilliant. If the rest of the book is as good as that, then it's an absolutely brilliant one. It's written in a way that you don't have to read it from cover to cover. You can just jump in, because the next bit that I'm going to be reading is the campaign section, obviously because that's my interest. So anyway, that's my quick unbooking of Tabletop Wargames. You can get it on Amazon. How much is it? $14.99 or $24.95 is its cover price. Don't know what the price is on Amazon. Like I say, pre-order, it just arrived today, this morning. So yeah, there you go. Well, thanks for watching, and I hope it's been of some use to you. Bye.